The Celestia Code, Chapter 1, The Treasure Room. As I watched the books burn among the ruins, I couldn't help the near instinctive urges that jolted through me like electricity. I could save them. A small shield spell around the fire would starve it of oxygen almost immediately, and when the heap had cooled down enough not to reignite I could... But no, it was already too late. The fire wasn't small like the countless ones I had set going in the fireplace of my bedroom above the library. Those fires had been comforting, their heat gentle, their flames waving slowly, almost like Celestia's mane when backlit by the sun. I shook my head to clear it and brought myself back to reality. The bonfire hissed and roared, flames and burning bits of paper leaping skyward. The heat was sharp and uncomfortable, even at a dozen lengths distance. My mane fluttered in the breeze caused by the air rushing in to feed the blaze, as if in mockery of the ethereal motion of Celestia's. I felt nauseous again. If I could reverse a chemical reaction, flip entropy around, perhaps a failsafe spell? No, it was beyond my power. I was just panicking in a silent, cerebral way. What had been done could not be undone. Even books that had been written by some wooden-headed ideologue who wouldn't know the scientific method if it bugged her in the teeth were nearly sacred to me. My reverence didn't stop me from adding a note of scathing commentary in the margins, but to actually deliberately destroy a book? It was unthinkable. Until that night. Until I set fire to scores of unique manuscripts that bore knowledge recorded nowhere else in the world, destroying them forever. It was a crime I could never forgive myself for, but it was an act that was unquestionably necessary. "Twilight?" came a voice from the darkness behind me. "Twilight, where are you?" I groaned and squeezed my eyes shut. Unquestionably necessary, but impossible to explain or justify. Only a few short days before, I couldn't even have imagined such an appalling situation. I was very disappointed when the dragon had decided to kill me, and it was slightly depressing to recall how seldom logic had worked when negotiating with various creatures during my journey. I explained that we would only be in the dragon's territory for a brief while, that I needed just a bit of information about the old ruins somewhere to the south, and that I would provide the dragon with several superb emeralds for its cooperation. Simple, really. Both parties would benefit from the transaction. The dragon heard me out, smiled, and took in a deep breath preparatory to roasting me alive. I sighed and slammed the dragon's head against the roof of the cave with a burst of telekinetic magic. Blue fire rode a howl of pain out of the dragon's serrated jaws and curled harmlessly around the stalactites. The dragon snarled and swung a blow at me with a massive foreclaw. I shook my head sadly as my shield spell stopped the blow several body lengths away from where I stood. "All right, if you don't want to be sensible, let me put it this way." I'm a bit reluctant to admit that I actually got a fair bit of pleasure out of the next few moments of bouncing the dragon around the inside of its cave like a pebble in a vigorously shaken jar. It wasn't because I enjoyed causing harm, even to a pony-eating monster, but because it took a fair bit of precision to inflict a suitable amount of violence without causing any lasting damage. I always love getting practice in practical applications of my magic. When the dragon regained consciousness, it found me laying on its snout, forelegs casually crossed, wings neatly folded, with a look of mild sympathy on my face. "Now that I've explained things properly, do you think we can come to a peaceful agreement? Don't nod." I tried not to chuckle at the expression that flashed across the dragon's face. It wasn't just because the cross-eyed puzzlement, doubt, and confusion were funny-looking on a gigantic predator, but the twitches and ripples of muscles in the dragon's snout beneath me tickled a bit. "Okay," the dragon finally said as softly as it could manage. "But, do I still get to keep the emeralds?" "Of course!" I levitated the gems out of my left saddlebag and set them down in front of me. The dragon's eyes crossed even further. I lifted a large scroll out of the other bag and unrolled it. "I need to find a very old library. Now let me show you this map." The event that started off the whole adventure was when I discovered the obscure backroom in the Canterlot archives under a royal seal. It was a very powerful and carefully crafted seal. Only a princess could open it. Even the guard ponies patrolling the archives couldn't disable the magical lock. I had only tried it on a whim because I was certain that Celestia would have made the distinction between a divine highness and a royal or serene highness when setting up the spell. But, much to my surprise, the door had sighed open at the briefest touch of my magic. Evidently I was enough of a princess for the mystical gatekeeper, even though I was lowest on the Elecon totem pole. Should I have immediately closed the vault and told Celestia that there was an oversight in her security? Absolutely. Could I have possibly resisted the urge to take just one little peek at the treasures within? If you think so, you don't know me at all. I wish Spike had been with me. He would have told me to shut the door and to mind my own business. It was just barely possible that I might have listened to him. The scrolls and books within the vault were ancient. There were a few small boxes intermixed with the manuscripts, and nothing seemed to have a title or label. I touched a large volume gently with my magic and tucked it from its place. It seemed to be sturdy and well preserved, so I carefully opened it. It was a personal diary of Copernicus. Next to it was a scroll of essays by the feared Fireflower of Serpent Spire, with margin notes that looked very like the quill work of Clover the Clever. I tried not to hyperventilate. Just then I think I understood how a dragon might feel when it discovered a huge, unexpected cage of gems and gold. I could lock myself in, teleport food and water directly into my stomach so I wouldn't have to look away from the pages to eat. Sent a note to Celestia and my friends with some lame excuse that would explain a half-year's absence. I sighed and returned the scroll to its place on the shelf. I took a deep breath and began to formulate a rational plan. The first thing to do would be to tell Celestia I'd found the vault and hope that the fact that it opened to my magic wasn't a mistake. I reluctantly sealed the vault and teleported to the entryway of the throne room. Morning coat had just ended and Celestia suggested we walk in the upper garden as we talked. I couldn't bear to draw out the situation with polite small talk, so we had barely set hoof to grass before I blurted out, "That sealed room in the archives that's under the east turret? I took a look in there this morning and, I was wondering if I should have. I didn't know if I was allowed to." Unless I imagined it, Celestia looked a bit surprised for an instant. "Well, you didn't have any difficulty opening it, did you?" "Oh, not at all," I assured her. She nodded thoughtfully and took a moment before replying, "Feel free to browse as you wish. I would ask only that you don't take any of the items away from Canterlot. It has been so long since I have looked in there that I couldn't give you a very clear idea of the contents, but most are very rare, if not unique." I suddenly felt 20 pounds lighter. "Oh, thank you! Is there a list of contents somewhere? An index or something?" She grinned at my enthusiasm. "I don't believe so, Twilight. Perhaps that is a task you would like to take on?" Oh, she knew me so very well. The thought of cataloguing a room full of historic manuscripts, books, and other items made me go a bit lightheaded. "I'd be delighted," I said. That afternoon I returned to the archives and began working out a scheme and timetable for recording the vault's contents. As much as I hated to admit it, because of my already busy schedule, my visits to the vault would have to be irregular and relatively brief. I summoned a notebook, quill and inkwell and sketched out a diagram of the layout of the room, with case and shelf numbers assigned clockwise and top to bottom. Then I labeled the following pages, one for each shelf, which probably left enough space for a short description of each item. If I needed extra room, I could always use endnotes. I recorded the contents of the first shelf and then forced myself to quit, even though I still felt a desperate need to devour everything I touched. Just on the first shelf alone was a history of a pre-equestrian trading empire I'd never even heard of, and a small box that was being used as a bookend containing an astrolabel fashioned by Starswell himself. Not to mention an illustrated volume on bat pony anatomy. I carefully sealed the vault and sent my notebook to the bedside table in my chambers. I was distracted and spacey at that evening, and at dinner Luna asked me if I had met anyone special. "Huh?" I pulled myself out of my self-indulgent revelry. I beg your pardon, Luna?" "You are furlongs away tonight, Twilight Sparkle," she said with a sly grin. "I know well the most common cause of such distraction." "Oh no, nothing like that." "Nay, but now comes color to your cheeks. Tell me truly, is he a worthy stallion?" I sputtered a bit before replying, "No, honestly, Luna." "Oh, Luna," Celestia broke in. "Don't tease her like that. If Twilight wants to keep her lover a secret—" I gave an inarticulate squeak of outrage just before I realized what was going on. "Oh, you two are impossible!" They both broke out into laughter and, after a short period of grumpy face, I joined them. "I'm afraid," Celestia said, addressing her sister, "that Twilight reserves her true passion for the printed word." "Indeed?" Luna raised an eyebrow, then turned to me. "I could arrange a romantic, moonlit evening for you and a well-proportioned bookshelf if you wish." "Ha! Ha!" There were a few moments of silence as the soup course was removed and the salad served, and then Celestia said to me, "Joking aside, Twilight, is there any pony you're interested in that way?" "Oh, well, I mean, no. Not that I haven't noticed a few stallions." I felt my cheeks warming again and I shrugged. "But when would I have the time to get to know one? I study more than ever now, I have my official duties, and I'm trying hard not to neglect my friends." "A mate can also be a friend, Twilight," Celestia said quietly. "In fact, it works best if friendship comes first." I nodded. "I'll put make more stallion friends on my to-do list." The sisters broke out into laughter again. "What?" It was only a few weeks later when I found the journal. I was about 7/8 of the way through cataloging the Vault of Treasures, as I had privately named the Room of Precious Books, when I encountered it. Yes, weeks may seem like a long time to make a glorified list, but I was trying to be very precise and thorough, not to mention I was shuttling between Canterlot, the castle of the two sisters, and my own castle in Ponyville during that time. Admittingly, I had gotten sucked into some of the more interesting pieces and lost several hours of cataloging time to fascinating sidetracks. With my notebook and quill floating by my side, I pulled another volume from the shelf I was working on and flipped open the cover. I was relieved to see a neatly formatted title page. So many of the manuscripts just started abruptly, and it took some skimming and reading to determine what their subjects were. The inscription read, "Property of Professor Sharphoof, Grinnett College Chair of Archaeology, Canterlot University, Canterlot, Equestria. Third Badlands Expedition, Volume 2. Below that was a stamped image of a torch crossed with a writing quill. Most likely the professor's cutie mark, I thought. It certainly didn't match any of the University College crests. An archaeologist? That was odd. The name was familiar, and as I recalled, she was a rebel or revolutionary from the 8th century of Celestia's reign, mentioned briefly in— I couldn't bring the title of the history to mind. Maybe I was confusing her with another pony of the same name, but according to the dates in the journal, the time period was roughly the same. I flipped through the pages and was struck by the high quality of the amazing maps, diagrams, and drawings of things the expedition had found. The illustrations were beautifully detailed and conveyed even the texture of the items they depicted. Sandstone, pottery, glass, even though only black ink had been used to create them. Then one illustration hit me like a physical blow. It was a picture of a bas-relief that covered an entire wall. The central figure was obviously Celestia, and surrounding her was a multitude of tiny figures, mostly ponies. It wasn't uncommon for ancient art to wildly exaggerate the size difference between the princess and her subjects, or even to place them beneath her hoofs as a symbol of her sovereignty over them, but this carving was different. The ponies beneath her hoofs were obviously in pain, as if being crushed by her weight, and those surrounding her were not bowing in reverence, but rather cowering in fear. Oh, the difference was very subtle, yes, but unmistakable nonetheless. Even conveyed second-hand, the artist who had done the drawing was skilled enough to make the distinctions clear. I was horrified. Who would have dared depict Celestia in such a way? Maybe Sharphoof was a rebel of some sort, and she had distorted the sculpture through her drawing for some political reason I couldn't fathom? But crude propaganda hidden away in academic notes? It didn't make any sense at all. I hadn't considered removing any of the works from the vault before then, but I knew I couldn't rest until I had gotten to the bottom of this mystery. I could have simply asked Celestia, of course, but the mere thought of confronting her with that obscene illustration made my stomach knot up. I transported the journal along with the rest of my materials back to my chambers and sealed the vault. On the way out of the archive building, I asked the reference librarian on duty to compile a report on whatever was known about an 8th century pony or ponies named Sharphoof and have it delivered to me as soon as possible. "Of course, Your Highness," the saffron-colored mare assured me. "I will see to it personally and immediately." Sometimes it's very handy being a princess.